Is having a smartphone a requirement in 2022? Do not forget to like, share, subscribe and ring the bell for more videos. For more and more people, the answer is yes. For many people a smartphone is indispensable, as necessary as food and water. Others, however, may not see the appeal. According to CNBC, for example, Warren Buffett used a flip phone for years before finally upgrading to an iPhone in 2020. This raises an important question: is a smartphone a necessity in 2022? There are several strong arguments to be made in favor of smartphones as a requirement, though affording one may not be realistic for everyone. Key takeaways: an estimated 85% of Americans use a smartphone, according to Pew Research. Point 2. Smartphones can be necessary for a variety of reasons, ranging from online security to gaining entry to beaches and other recreational areas to riding public transportation. Owning a smartphone may be challenging for lower-income households, though there are programs that can provide financial assistance. As more people live digitally, it stands to reason that smartphones will only become more important in the future. Smartphone ownership and use. Smartphone ownership has grown tremendously over the past decade. According to the Pew Research Center, 35% of Americans owned a smartphone in 2011, and that figure grew to 85% by 2021. 2. Men and women tend to own smartphones in equal numbers, though Americans under 65 are more likely to have one. 96% of young adults aged 18 to 29 own a smartphone, versus 61% of adults aged 65 or older. Smartphone users also tend to live in urban areas rather than suburban or rural, have a college degree, and make $75,000 a year or more. Point 2. So for what, exactly, are people using their smartphones? Some of the most common uses include 3. Checking social media, playing games or using other apps, making phone calls or texting. Aside from that, people can also use smartphones to pay bills, check bank account balances, manage their budgets, send money to friends and family, and shop online at their favorite stores. The typical person checks their phone every 5 minutes, and 75.4% of Americans consider themselves to be addicted to their phones. Point 3. Still, does that mean they're necessary? 15%. The percentage of Americans who rely on their smartphone as their only source of internet access at home, according to the Pew Research Center. 2. The case for smartphones as a requirement. It's easy to say that smartphones are a luxury rather than a necessity. After all, people managed to live without them for centuries. Nevertheless, that ignores a number of changes that have taken place in how people work and live. Smartphones in the workplace. The increasingly digital nature of the workplace presents the first example of why smartphones should be considered a requirement rather than an option. As more companies use cloud technology to store information and online platforms to keep workers connected, it presents a need for enhanced security protections. Innovations such as two-factor authentication, 2FA, also known as multi-factor authentication, MFA, make that possible. MFA allows employees, including remote workers, to securely access digital platforms by entering a code, and a key requirement for using it is a smartphone. Employees who are interested in remote work and independent contractors who work from home will likely need smartphones. Security aside, smartphones can also be vital for staying connected with work through messaging apps or tools such as Zoom. If your employer requires you to have a smartphone for work that you pay for, ask whether any of those expenses are reimbursable. Smartphones for recreation and travel. Smartphones could also be considered a requirement if you travel or engage in recreational activities. For example, the state of New Jersey now issues beach access badges through the Vipli app. This allows travelers and tourists to bypass otherwise long wait lines to get seasonal, daily, or weekly beach passes. Point 4. Disney World visitors can download an app that allows them to reserve and pay for contactless dining, navigate the park, and access Magic Band features. The app also features direct-to-room services when staying at Disney Resort hotels. Point 5. Aside from those types of apps, there are other apps that can make travel easier. For example, if you're catching a flight, your airline may give you the option to download a mobile boarding pass so you can skip the check-in lines. More chain hotels are also offering mobile apps that let you check in and out via your smartphone instead of the front desk. The New York City Metropolitan Transport Authority, MTA, is planning to replace fare cards for subways and buses with the OMI payment system by 2023. Using it will require either a contactless credit, debit, or prepaid card or a smartphone or smartwatch equipped with a digital wallet. If you don't have one or the other, you won't be able to ride public transportation in NIC. 6. Smartphones for healthcare. Healthcare is another area where smartphones are becoming increasingly important. Telehealth apps, for instance, allow people to chat with a physician live without leaving home. These types of apps could be vital for someone who has ongoing health issues but can't always visit a doctor in person. You can also use a laptop or desktop for telehealth, of course. Smartphones for vaccine mandates. President Biden initiated a COVID-19 vaccine mandate for federal employees and contractors in July 2021, and then followed it up with mandates for businesses with 100 or more employees and healthcare workers at facilities that accept Medicare and Medicaid in November 2021. However, they are currently blocked due to pending litigation. 8. The existence of vaccine mandates varies across the country, with different states and localities choosing different strategies, including some states forbidding them by law. They may also be necessary to gain entry at private venues. For example, you may need to show proof of vaccination to gain entry to sporting events, concerts, and college campuses. New York City instituted a stringent vaccine mandate, requiring proof of vaccination for everyone 5 and older at all public indoor activities, which was discontinued on March 7, 2022. This included restaurants, grocery stores, theaters, movie houses, concert venues, gyms, swimming pools, exhibition halls, hotel event spaces, and more. 9. In the case of a vaccine mandate, a smartphone would be a requirement for using a vaccine passport app, such as New York City's COVID Safe app and New York State's Excelsior Pass. 910. Showing proof of vaccination may be a requirement when traveling internationally to countries outside the U.S. It is required for foreign air travelers entering the United States. 11. Affording the cost of a smartphone. Though you could reasonably say that a smartphone is a necessity for many people, affording them isn't always easy. Smartphones can bring with them a number of costs, including the cost of purchasing the phone itself, accessories such as Bluetooth earpieces and car chargers, insurance protection plans, monthly service. On average in 2020, the typical cell phone plan cost $113 per month. 12. The global average smartphone selling price was $363 in 2021, and premium smartphone models can cost $1,000 or more. Apple's iPhone 13 Pro goes for $1,599. 1314. For someone living on a tight budget, those numbers can be daunting. Thus, in addition to asking whether a smartphone is a requirement in 2022, it's also important to ask how the average person can afford to pay for it. Some of the best ways to save money on cell phone service include buying a used phone instead of a new one, opting for prepaid phone service in lieu of a contract plan, choosing the lowest smartphone service plan possible, sharing the cost with others through a family plan. Leasing a smartphone could also save money and afford another benefit, the ability to upgrade to a new phone every year or so. In that sense, leasing a phone is similar to leasing a car. When the lease term ends, you can choose a new phone, keep the one you have, and sign a new lease, or buy the phone outright. Smartphone financing may be an option if you want to buy a phone to own. You can find it through retailers such as Best Buy, cell phone service providers, cell phone manufacturers such as Samsung and Apple, or through Buy Now, Pay Later (BNPL) platforms. With BNPL, you're getting a point-of-sale installment loan instead of using a traditional installment loan or credit card. Any of these options might be worth exploring if you're looking for a way to finance a phone purchase while saving money on interest. If you're interested in BNPL options such as Klarna or Affirm, be sure to compare financing terms and credit requirements first to find the best fit. How many people have smartphones? The Pew Research Center discovered that 85% of Americans owned a smartphone in 2021, up from only 35% a decade earlier. 2. How do people use their smartphones? The most popular smartphone activities are making phone calls, texting, checking social media, playing games, and using apps. They are also used for sending money, shopping online, paying bills, checking bank accounts, sending emails, and budget management. In addition, they are useful for checking weather forecasts and getting directions when traveling via the Global Positioning System (GPS). Where are smartphones most useful? They have become integral to the workplace, especially for independent contractors and others working remotely from home, useful for gaining privileged access to travel and recreation, helpful for accessing healthcare, and convenient for providing proof of vaccination against COVID-19. What do smartphones cost? The average price of a smartphone in 2021 was $363, though premium phones can cost well over $1,000.14. On top of that is the cost of your cell phone plan, which averaged $113 monthly in 2020.12. The bottom line: if you use a smartphone regularly, you may not give much thought to how central a role it plays in your day-to-day life. Whether you view smartphones as a necessity or not, it's clear that dependence on them continues to increase at work, at home, and while traveling. Affording a smartphone is possible, though it may require some planning to find a phone and service plan that align with your budget. Pros and cons of smartphone leasing. Pros and cons of smartphone leasing. High prices make buying hard for some. Smartphones make everyday life easier on many levels. Whether you want to log into online banking, get directions when taking a road trip, or check the weather, you can do it all with a smartphone. That convenience can come at a price, however. Some premium smartphone models cost more than $1,000 on average, as of 2020.1. Leasing a smartphone may seem like a more attractive option than buying one, if you would like to have the latest model without the high price tag. Key takeaways. Premium smartphone models can easily sell for $1,000 or more on average. Leasing a smartphone offers the benefit of being able to upgrade to the latest models regularly without incurring contract fees. Keeping a smartphone at the end of a lease term may require paying a buyout fee to purchase it. Leasing could save money over buying new phones, but it doesn't convey ownership, similar to leasing a car or an apartment. What is smartphone leasing? Leasing a smartphone is similar to leasing a car or an apartment. You sign a lease with a smartphone leasing company, which gives you the right to use the smartphone for a set period of time. In return, you make lease payments. Point 2. It's important to note that leasing is not the same as buying a phone on an installment plan, which many cell phone networks also offer as an option for making smartphones more affordable. Spectrum, for example, allows you to pay in 24 monthly installments, after which you own the phone outright. Point 3. When you lease, you generally need to make one initial payment up front, followed by weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly payments. The length of the lease term can vary from one provider to the next. T-Mobile, for example, offers 18-month smartphone leasing. Point 4. At the end of the lease term, you have the option to return the phone and lease a different one. Sign a new lease for the same smartphone. Purchase the smartphone that you've been leasing. You also may be able to lease accessories for the phone, such as Bluetooth earpieces or car chargers. Point 5. Anything you pay toward the lease covers only the physical use of the phone. You need to pay for cell phone service separately. Smartphone leasing may or may not require a credit check, depending on the company from which you're getting the phone. This could make it a good option for people who don't have sufficient credit to purchase a regular contract phone. Unless you purchase equipment protection insurance, you may be responsible for covering any damages to a leased smartphone out of pocket. Point 6. Pros and cons of smartphone leasing. Leasing a smartphone could make more sense than buying one in some cases. Whether it's right for you can depend on your credit, budget, and needs. Here's a quick look at how the pros and cons of smartphone leasing compare. Pros. Regular upgrades are available. It may be less expensive than buying. Credit may not be an obstacle. Cons. The leasing company owns the phone. Buyout fees may apply. Leasing can involve additional fees. Regular upgrades are available. Smartphone technology is constantly evolving and adapting, with new models being released all the time. If you're a tech aficionado, then leasing a smartphone makes it easier to upgrade when a new model comes along. Depending on the length of the lease term, it's possible to get a new phone every year, allowing you to keep up with the latest technological advancements. It may be less expensive than buying. Though a typical premium smartphone model can run in the range of $1,000 or more, The global average smartphone selling price in 2021 is only $363.7. Leasing one will require you to make a small initial payment of $50 to $100, followed below monthly payments. At T-Mobile, for example, it's possible to pay as little as $8.25 per month to lease a Samsung Galaxy A11 for 18 months. With $0 down. 8 That's $148.50, which is $32.50 less than the phone's standard list price of $180.8. The most expensive phone that T-Mobile leases is the Apple iPhone 12 64GB. With a list price of $699.9, you pay $26.12 per month on an 18-month lease, plus $150 down. 4 This comes to a total of $620.16, which gives you a savings of $78.84. If you turn in your phone after 18 months for a new phone, and if you make sure that the total lease cost on your new phone will be less than its list price, then you will continue to come out ahead of the game. Still, you'll likely be paying nearly what the phone costs without ever owning it. Credit may not be an obstacle. A credit check is standard for many cellular service providers when applying for a contract phone. 10 Poor credit may not result in a denial of service, but you may have to offer a larger deposit to get a phone. With smartphone leasing, poor credit or no credit history at all may not be a roadblock to getting service. Smartphone leasing may require a hard or soft credit check, so you should ask about this before applying for a lease. Leasing company owns the phone. When you lease a smartphone, you don't own it. The cell phone company or lease provider does. Again, that's similar to leasing an apartment or a vehicle. On the other hand, when you purchase a smartphone, it's yours. That means that you can decide what to do with it, including whether to keep it or sell it to someone else. You don't have that option with leasing unless you decide to buy the phone later. Buyout fees may apply. If you have the option at the end of the lease term to purchase a smartphone that you've been leasing, it's important to consider the buyout fee. This is a fee that you pay to own the phone going forward. The amount that you'll pay to buy a leased phone can vary from company to company, so it's important to read the fine print beforehand. That way, you can run the numbers to understand whether it's cheaper to lease and then buy, as opposed to skipping leasing and just buying the phone up front. Leasing can involve additional fees. When you lease a car, the dealership can charge additional fees for wear and tear or high mileage when you turn it in at the end of the lease term. The same thing can happen with leasing a smartphone. If you turn in a device that's damaged beyond what's expected for normal use, you could be charged extra fees. 4. When choosing a smartphone lease, also calculate the cost of any minimum service plans that you're required to have for the device to work properly. The bottom line: smartphones today are increasingly ubiquitous and changing the world in which we live. Leasing a smartphone is something you may consider if you would rather not be committed to a single phone model for the long term. It also could be a good fit if you have calculated the cost differences between buying a phone outright and leasing and have determined that the latter is less expensive. Before signing a smartphone lease, be sure to read through the details carefully to understand what you'll pay and what your options are once the lease term expires.